10 random magic cards rated. Day number 97, everybody. How's your Monday so far? Hope it's okay. Hope your boss hasn't been a jerk or anything already. Come on, dude. It's like 11 o'clock on a Monday morning. You gotta chill out. But either way, let's make your week slightly better already here on the first day by looking at the first card. It's Rakshasa Debaser. 6 mana, 4 and 2 black for a 6/6 cat demon. When it attacks, put target creature card from defending player's graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. This also has Encore for 8 mana, so you exile it from your yard. And for each opponent, you create a token copy that attacks that opponent this turn if able. Those copies gain haste, so act them at the beginning of the next end step, Encore only, as a sorcery. So if it's in your yard, you can pay more mana and get more copies of it. A bunch of copies of it. This is actually kind of sick. I have seen this card around, but not enough times to like really internalize it or be like, ooh, yeah, look at that. I'm not, like I said, I've read this card before, but I'm not sure that I'm like that into it. It does cost an awful lot of mana to use both modes. Even like the normal mode is 6 mana. And you have to wait for it to attack, which is not good. It's probably not going to be able to do that. So like what this actually is an 8 mana card you have to get into your graveyard somehow first. And like that's still not great, but I do like that when you do Encore, you get like a bunch of copies of it. You get 3 copies of it at the very least, depending on the size of your table. Usually you're going to get 3 copies of it and get like 3 things from your opponent's yard. So cool card, but probably not amazing. I'm going to give it a, man, am I going to make people upset at me first thing on Monday morning? I try to make your week better, not worse, but I'm going to give this a 4.9 because I think we're almost there in terms of like big, stupid, splashy effect that can win you the game and all that. But you're telegraphing a lot here, on both modes. Cause on one, it's in your graveyard. Your opponents know about it. And on the other, you have to wait a whole turn. So I'm just not super into it. If I'm going to pay that much mana, I want to effectively win the game, like almost for sure. And this doesn't even do that. So I just, whatever, 4.9-ish, something like that. We'll move on to Hooded Brawler from Amonkhet here. This is a 3 mana, 2 and a green, for a 3/2 Naga Warrior. You may exert Hooded Brawler as it attacks. When you do, it gets +2/+2 until end of turn. By the way, it's not a Naga anymore. It's a snake now. A lot of people hate this change. I kind of like it because there's a few things in Magic that care about snakes, and Nagas they're not snakes. They weren't before, right? So now the Naga, like, benefit from all these cards that care about snakes, the what few that do, right? So I don't know, I kind of like it as a change, but it's pretty bad. Card's not good. I'm glad that I was able to fill the time talking about it by actually talking about something I found interesting, because card itself is not 3 mana 5 power guy, hey, but that's about it. Exerting, by the way, in case you haven't read this ability before, basically means that when you choose to exert, it doesn't untap during your next untap step, and then subsequent attack steps it will untap. So you kind of put a stun counter on it a little bit. And depending on the card we're looking at, Exert can be very good or just terrible. So I'm not a fan. Let's give it a 2.1, something like that. Next is Rush the Room from Lord of the Rings, Middle-earth. This is a single red mana for an instant. A creature gets +1/+0 and gains first strike till end of turn. If it's a goblin or an orc, it also gains haste till end of turn. Hey, so we've seen this card a billion times. Is +1/+0 and first strike for a mana. So combat trick with some sort of weird upside. And in this case, it's goblins and orcs, which is fine, but not amazing. So I'm just going to give this card like a 1.9 because we've seen too many iterations of it, and no iteration of it really ever sees play. Like what Defiant Strike saw play when Feather was in format. So that's it. Literally it. And Defiant Strike draws you a card. This does not even come close to doing that. Web is up next. This is originally printed, I believe, in the way back. This is a single green mana for an aura that enchants a creature. Enchanted creature gets +0/+2 and has reach. Doesn't it? The old one specifically lets you know it does not gain the flying ability. But yeah, turn any guy into a giant spider. Back in the day, that was sort of the flavor of this. It's pretty cool, man. As far as auras go, I like a 1 mana aura. I do, so long as it gives you some value. But this is all defensive value, which in most cases is not going to be amazing, So the best thing this did back in the day was for your Venduran Enchantress deck, you would actually play this because it's a single mana to draw a card. You throw it on your Enchantress or another creature, and suddenly it can block Serra Angels and Cinder Vampires and Hypnotic Specters and stuff like that. So that was actually a consideration back in the meta of like 1994, but It's not so, kitchen table specifically, but it's not so much now, obviously. Web is like a 1.7. It's just not a very good Magic card. Next is Vampire Hex Mage. This is a fine Magic card. 2 black mana, originally printed in Zendikar. It's a 2/1 Vampire Shaman with first strike, and if you sacrifice it, you remove all the counters from a permanent. A couple of ways of messing around with this. You can kill Planeswalkers with it, which is neat. You know, just sack it, kill whatever Planeswalker, just remove all the loyalty counters. But also, it can remove like -1/-1 counters and +1/+1 counters for the purposes of persist and, you know, those abilities, right? The ones where the creature comes back, unless it has a counter on it. So Vampire Hex Mage can remove all the counters and make sure it comes back. And there's like tricks, you know, there's even combos where, Vampire Hex Mage can also remove all the counters from a Dark Depths, which becomes like a 20/20 creature when you remove all the counters from it. So Hex Mage has done some pretty exciting things over its sort of tenure, you know, as a Magic card. So I like Hex Mage, dude. It's always got like, it can always do something, you know, and it like just goes in Vampire decks. And 2 mana, 2 power, first strike is like kind of fine some of the time. So let's give Hex Mage a 6 because I think it's got kind of a lot of niches that it fits into without ever being like blowout powerful, except for maybe Dark Depths, you know. But Tavern Swindler is up next. So 2 mana, 1 and a black for a 2/2 human rogue. You tap it, you pay 3 life and flip a coin. If you happen to win that flip, you're going to gain 6 life. This is originally printed in Return to Ravnica and has been reprinted a few times since then. It was in Streets of New Capenna, Core Set 2021. Card has never been great. I'll have to say that much. I don't like more or less anything where I have to flip coins. The moment I read flip a coin or roll a die on a Magic card, I'm just kind of out. You know what I mean? I lose all interest. She's pretty. I'll say that she's pretty lady. But apart from that, the card's just not great. It's a rogue. Yeah, it's a human. I guess these are decent creature types, but who actually cares? Let's say this is a 2. Sure. The best thing you can do is gain 6. Yeah, it's not a big deal. Abyssal Spectre, not Hypnotic Spectre, but it is Abyssal Spectre. This is originally printed in Ice Age. 4 mana, 2 and 2 black for a 2/3 Spectre with flying. When it deals damage to any player, that player chooses and discards a card from his or her hand. Ignore this ability if the player has no cards in their hand. So this is one of the first examples. By the way, I do love this card. I love the Ruth Thompson art. It looks really freaking cool. This card kind of is Ice Age to me in some ways. I think a lot of people would point to Jester's Cap, obviously. And there's a few other Ice Age cards I think people hold very dear, you know, like Yockelhops, especially Yockelhops, Stormbind. There's an awful lot of very sort of famous Ice Age cards. To each their own, and they're all different for different people. But I think this card, like when I look at it, it reminds me more of Ice Age than like any card. You know, like when I think of Ice Age, I think of this card sometimes, is all I'm saying. This is one of the first examples in Magic history of like, okay, we're going to remake a card and power it down because the first one was a little bit too much. You know what I mean? So let's power it down in a couple ways. It costs an extra mana. You can never get this on turn 1 with Dark Ritual. So play it on turn 2. And they get to choose and discard the card rather than it being random. The only thing we're going to do to make it slightly better is give it an extra point of toughness. So it can eat Hypnotic Spectres in combat, but they both still die to bolt, you know? So you can see what some of the thought process was with building this card. We're going to reference a card that's only 2 years old. We're going to reference that card, and we're going to do it right this time. And Magic has carried that on for a very long time. We see power creep, obviously, and this is kind of negative power creep. So we see creatures that are way better now than they used to be. But we still see creatures, even to this day, that are like, oh, this is meant to reference this other guy, but it's not as good as that guy. You know, we see that a lot. And again, this is one of the first examples of what is now a tried and true tradition over at Wizards of the Coast headquarters. Just a neat card. So in case I haven't actually said what it does yet, I kind of just did. But yeah, flying 2/3 whenever it deals damage to a player, combat damage. Actually, is it damage? It's just damage, not combat damage. Whenever it deals damage, the player chooses and discards a card. Ignore this if they have no cards in hand. I don't know why you felt like you had to write that at the end of the card. But yeah, 4 mana for this whole package. So I can't give it as high a score as I would Hypnotic, right? Even though, God, this art, look at it. It's a skeleton unicorn. It's got like a flaming axe. He's wearing antlers and like black knight armor with a red cape. So cool. So cool. So cool. I'm no longer, you know, 12 years old, like I was when this card came out, but I still think it's awesome. I'm stalled enough. I want to give this card an honorary 5. I feel the compulsion to do that, and I'm going to. I was going to say I'm not going to, but I might give it very close to a 5 if I weren't going to give it an honorary 5 anyway. So sure, honorary 5. I think Abbey Spec deserves that. I don't know if you guys do, but I do. We'll move on to Seismic Rupture here. This is 3 mana, 2 and a red for a sorcery that deals 2 damage to each creature without flying. So originally and only printed in Dragons of Tarkir, this is not an amazing card, but it is a sweeper effect in red. You like those when you get them, you know? So I'll give this a 4.3. Because again, it's really just worse Pyroclasm, but the sweeper effects in red are not necessarily few and far between. You get them every now and again, but they're not, you know, these kinds aren't amazing. Voice of Reason from Urza's Destiny is up next. This is 4 mana, 3 and a white for a 2/2 flying pro blue. That's the entire card. I think there's a cycle from the Urza's block that's basically this, you know, like 4 mana, 2/2 flyers that have protection from a color. Might be wrong, but I think there's at least a couple of these. And they're all fine. Pro blue is one of the worst protections that you can really have, but I guess it's not going to get bounced. There's that. Can't be blocked by, you know, blue flyers, and there's a lot of blue flyers. So, not like the worst thing in the world, but still not great. Not for 4 mana. So, we will give this a 3. Protection's a strong ability. It is. We'll move on to Clear a Path here. This is a single red mana for a sorcery. Destroy a creature with Defender. Boo. It's terrible. It's really not good. Why would you put this in a deck? 1. Pretty sure that's worth a 1. Prodigal Sorcerer Tim. There are some who call me Tim. This is 3 mana, 2 and a blue for a 1/1 wizard. It's a human wizard, in case you wanted to know. Tap to deal damage to any target. Blue used to be able to do direct damage. You know, we had Psychic Blast. There are a few things. Psychic Venom, you know, that did damage in blue. It was not unheard of. I wish that we would give blue that ability back from time to time. Mind Bomb. There's a few. But blue's direct damage was always kind of bad, you know. But just fine enough to be called fine. Prodigal Sorcerer was a beloved card back in the day, although I'm not sure it was ever a good card. The best thing Prodigal Sorcerer did was come down a little bit later in the game and clear up any small dudes that hit the board early. Would be sort of the primary job of the card. And then once it did that, or after the Wrath of God, your opponent doesn't have any guys, sometimes it comes down, and then you just pick their dudes off with Swords of Plowshares or whatever, and eventually finish them with like 2 Prodigal Sorcerers dealing damage every turn. Not a great or reliable plan, to be honest, but it was one that people did back in the day. I've actually been in multiple games where there are 4 Prodigal Sorcerers in play on one side of the table or the other in my Magic career. I should have saved the honorable 5 for Tim, but I actually think it's a better thought experiment to think about what we would actually score this card in the year 2024. In 1994, I think I would have scored this card like a 5.7, you know? But nowadays, I think it's closer to like a 3.9, somewhere in there. But I do love Tim, and I miss Tim. I do. I wish that we at least had this card in Magic still. You know, like it was still getting printed in Standard or something. It wouldn't do anything. This card would do like literally nothing. But it'd be fun to have. Maybe we'll get it in Foundations. Maybe we will. Fingers crossed. But that is all for Monday, everybody. I'll see you bright and early Tuesday. Love you all. Bye.